All right, so I guess what I wanted to do, I put a quick agenda out there a little bit ago, and I want to, I think, switch things around just a little bit from the order that was out there, and start with talking about the 921 release. We talked last week about the 921 release, getting to a point of getting that ready so we can start the release candidate process, basically looking at getting that code freeze set. Wanted to kind of talk with everybody, see where that's at, if there's things that people are still passionate that we need to get in for that release. And then I think kind of use that as a segue into the work that you've been doing, Andrew, as well as Oliver, on automated builds and packaging, in terms of, can we utilize that process to prepare the release candidate builds for a 921 release. Any thoughts? I guess, Oliver, I know you've been working on getting that board created that showed everything that's included in 921, et cetera. Where do we stand?
Yeah, I don't know if you want me to share my screen. But I can. Let's see. I don't know if that's working or not.
We can see your
screen. I see it. Yep.
All right, so I've got a 921 milestone that I've been mostly putting issues into after we've merged them. Right now, these are the bugs that are open, except for this one. There's no fix submitted yet. So I guess the biggest issue that's outstanding is the sharp zip library that Daniel submitted. In this pull request, I was actually researching another issue when I stumbled across another place in the code that is storing assembly names. And it would be my assumption that we would also need to change it for the new assembly name, but I'm not familiar with what the code is doing. Hopefully it might be something that Ash can speak towards. But there's this function called can-scan assembly, and down here on line 109, it is looking for the old sharp zip library and disabling whatever functionality is calling this function. So I guess I thought, right with my assumptions, we would need to add another line here for the new assembly that shipped with 920, but I'm not sure. Besides that, 921.
Yeah, that looks like a MEF loading, something like that. So yeah, if there is an assembly that you don't want to be investigated, you want to definitely have an entry there. Is that a new DLL?
Well, yeah, 920, the sharp zip library changed. I forget what the new name of it is. So in 920, that assembly is being searched, probably for extension points, even though it doesn't need to be.
Yeah, they renamed the DLL to IC sharp and then dot sharp zip lib.
Okay, so yeah, you definitely want to add that there so that it's not loading it up. It might be loading up to look for the routes or for map extensions, but not the routes, definitely map extensions and other stuff.
Sorry, I went back to the other page. I don't have the code right in front of me. I'm going back to it, but yeah, the platform right now is doing a starts with, so it would fail on the new assembly name. So we either just need to add another line for the new assembly name or change that starts with to it contains. And then after that, I think if everybody is good with the review of this pull request.
Yeah, I think what we need to do, I mean, I guess, you know, technically Daniel didn't introduce this change, but we found it here. If we could get him to just make the change real quick so he could just do it all at once, it'd be great. But otherwise, if somebody wants to create a separate pull request, we just need to make sure that we get that fixed as well.
Yeah, I don't mind creating the pull request. So if I guess somebody wants to merge Daniel's pull request in, I'll create a new one if he's not on this call and available.
Yeah,
that way we can.
If that works for you, then I can go ahead and do the review of his.
Yeah, my only recommendation is to do it as part of his pull request, because if you have to ever roll back, then you are able to roll back that whole thing. Otherwise, now you have to.
Yeah, so you would have to make the change because I'm not a contributor on his branch.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. So you may have to ask him to do that.
Okay.
If we're going to do the 2 pull requests, just make sure you link back to the parent issue. And then if we do need to roll back, we can just roll back all the pull requests because they'll be linked.
Yeah.
You can do that? I mean, that was my only concern, that if you have to roll back, then there is a way to kind of link them and roll back.
As long as the pull request, like, because in our contributing guide, it says that we should be marking inside the pull request fixes number, 1, 2, 3. So when the new pull request, if Oliver does that and then it's all linked in GitHub, if we do need to roll back, we can just say what pull requests how many pull requests are associated with this issue.
That'll work.
So you can go back to like Daniel's pull request and see which ones are linked to it, right? The new one would be linked to it.
Yep, you'd be able to link to both. You'd be able to link
both ways, right?
Yeah, you'd be able to link to issue 2095, which is the actual issue, and you'd be able to link to a related pull request for 2118. So, yeah.
It would show up like these do right here with 2019 and 2095.
Yeah.
They would show up further down in the history of this issue.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and as far as like issues,
and then besides that, everything that's closed is in here. So this will be what we'll end up generating the release notes for. I was actually going to create a new release and just have it as a draft in here that's not public, and just start putting the bullet points for what items were in there. That way, when we get closer to the RC, it's one less thing that needs to be done. So this is everything that's in 921. If you were to download latest, this is what you would have different from 920 today. And I guess, should I then segue into the CI issues that I've been working on? Or is there anything else 921 related?
I think from my perspective, I think the biggest thing at 921, still looking at being able to code freeze at the end of this week. Is there any concerns with that at this point? Anything, Ash, from an ESW perspective that you folks are working on that needs to get in, et cetera?
Not that I know. Thomas, do you know?
I would still have to double check, but I don't think there's anything really urgent or important at this point. So if we don't get something squeezed in this week, I think that's fine. That said, yes, maybe if you look on a pull request, I guess we may want to have some of those approved and merged, or decided explicitly that we don't need them for 921.
Okay.
Yeah, let me just have a look while we're on the call, and I'll get back to you if there's anything I think would be very important.
Okay, that would be perfect. And I think one of the things, real quick, I guess, before we go into that, we've got a policy in place in terms of review and those types of things. One of the things that I'm looking at is, as we look at things that are out here, we have certain pull requests, for example, that have been out here for quite a while, that are basically being noted as, like, I will review and resubmit those kinds of things. I believe, from my perspective, we should close those items since that requester is going to resubmit them. Does anybody disagree with that?
I have a couple of items in there I need to resubmit because they were created originally for 9.0 or something on 9.2, and so I have to submit them for the SQL. They are mostly updated SQL procedures, and I need to resubmit for the new files.
Okay. I mean, do you have any concerns, Sebastian, with me closing them and just noting that you'll be submitting a new updated pull request?
Yeah, okay, that's no problem for me.
Okay.
Or the other option, Sebastian, is you can go in and close all of the ones that you'll be redoing, and if any are still valid, that will be updated versus submitting a new pull request. You could leave those open if you wanted to, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I've reached out to everybody with an open pull request, and merged the ones that we could. The ones that were new features have been added into the 9.3 milestone. This one here, which is our oldest pull request at the moment. Brian went through and cleaned up all the conflicts the other day because we don't want to introduce any new features into 9.2.1 that would push to 9.3. So right after 9.2.1 ships, we'll be merging that and probably a couple other features in the main.
I actually have a question more for Clint. How are we managing the CLA?
Yeah, so I actually sent an email off about that again today. The .NET Foundation has some type of mechanism in place, and we requested access to that, and then they said that they were in transition or moving to a new CLA, which was supposedly better or whatever. I asked for access to that. They didn't respond, so I sent another email earlier this morning saying, like, look, we need to get something in place. So I'm, hoping that they'll respond back. If not, we'll have to make some decisions. So we're still doing it the way that we were previously, which is just signing forms and emailing them. We're trying to automate it.
Yeah, because the guys who are processing pull requests, they may or may not know whether the person has signed a CLA. And without a CLA, we will not be able to accept the pull request.
Yeah, that's for features, not for bug fixes.
Anything is because it's their intellectual property, and people can come and have a claim. So
bug fix is not an intellectual property.
No. Yeah, this is a policy that's any pull request, any code contribution requires CLA.
So I believe all the ones that I've personally merged have been from people that already have a CLA on file. I don't think we've gotten any new users really. I think the only one that doesn't is labeled on here pending CLA. I think I actually closed it because I think he commented saying that he couldn't submit the CLA because of the country he was in or something like that. I don't see the tag right now.
Yeah, so Clint, I think Clint, it makes sense to share just the username, because to protect the privacy and the signature and things like that, we can't share all the document. So we should have a way to share the list of GitHub usernames who have signed, and I think that should be a public list somewhere. Right?
Well, I mean, I could easily put it on a Google Drive and then share access to the usernames with the people who have access to review and approve, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I think going forward, Ash, the hope is that we'll be able to use the automated bot that the .NET Foundation has to get this done. So I think it's going to be a temporary thing that we have to manually do it.
Yeah, sounds good. Yeah, but so do we know, like someone has to go back for 9.2.1 and make sure that the pull request, the people have signed CLA, or we would have to chase them, or worst case, we would have to revert them.
Yeah, I mean, if you have that list of users, feel free to go through the pull requests
and let's just make sure
double check
that
all
everything has the CLA on file. If we have that list, let's do that, and then Oliver, you or I or whoever has time, let's run through and just make sure that all of the pull requests get that CLA on file flag added.
So that's probably something that I can do to save you guys some time. I will, after this meeting, give you guys access to that list. And then if y'all can give me a link, I guess it would be this one, like the pull requests that have been accepted, I can go through and compare users to people who have submitted and then, let you guys know.
I think
I'll get you a link for that.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure Josh did sign one, right?
Yeah, Josh signed one, and like I said, all the ones I've processed, I know I signed one, I know Mitch signed one. Those have kind of been the users that have been submitting pull requests in the last couple of weeks. I know he doesn't have one because this is his first pull request, and it's a localization file change, but there's a couple open questions there, so we haven't, actually merged that one in yet. But he'll definitely need a CLA. But besides that, I think everybody else on here has one that's got a pull request open.
Francisco, it won't be any issue at all.
Yep. Anything else, I guess, related to 921, or should we move on to?
Yeah, I have one more question. So I'm not clear who is doing the final packages. Is it ESW doing it, or is Andrew's VSTS doing the final builds?
Hopefully it'll be VSTS, but that will be, I guess, the outcome of this meeting. We'll find out.
All right, got it.
Oliver, that guy just emailed you as well, the Oren guy.
Oh, nice. I'll check it out after the meeting. So what me and Andrew have started working on, we've had 2 meetings, one last week and one yesterday. I put a couple more hours into it yesterday after the meeting. But basically it's a new builds task, which is what I've opened up here. If you need me to adjust and just show this window, I can. I'll make the font size slightly bigger. That might help. So it's a cake build task, which was a tool that Andrew was familiar with and recommended. I only have a couple hours of experience in it, and I like it so far. It is calling our existing build script, which is a MS build script called Create Community Packages. Nothing has changed in that script whatsoever. So basically what it's doing is this replaces the 4 bat scripts that are in the root of the project at the moment. You're able to call this script, and at once right now, the default build is this task here, which calls compile source, which will go out and do a NuGet restore on the solution, and then it calls MS build on the solution and goes through and compiles like the 743 packages that make up the .NET platform solution. The next step that is run is one that I was working on last night. This is the new part of the CI process, which is still a work in progress, and that is the external extension step. So what this does at the moment is it reaches out to the CK editor and downloads the latest source. It reaches out to the client dependency framework and downloads the latest source. It reaches out to the persona bar, downloads those 3 projects. From there, it unzips everything. It loops through all the solutions. It builds everything one by one. When that's complete, it goes through and grabs all the install zips. It moves them into our staging directory for the installer. client dependency framework that appears that gets packaged right into the bin directory. So it does that file copy. The reason why we're doing a second install here into the module folder is the persona bar has some issues with how long file paths are in that solution. So it cannot run under the default working directory. It has to run under a short directory name. Otherwise, we run into long path exceptions. And then the final output of this is a install and upgrade zip, which can be used to test the current build. It hopefully will be used to generate install and upgrades for pull requests as they come in. So if you see a pull request that you're concerned how it might interact with your modules, my goal is to give anyone the ability to download that release with that change from that pull request and kind of kick the tires and give it a more thorough review without having to download a gigabyte and a half of data from GitHub and set up all the dependencies and get everything compiling on your local machine. The output of that is, yep.
Can I put in a couple points in before we go forward?
Oh, of course.
Yeah, because you kind of glazed over this, I just wanted to explain a little bit more. So if you guys haven't guessed, Cake is a C# build engine, more or less. It pretty much allows us to write all of our build tasks in C#. So as Oliver went through, we had sections that were denoted as task with a name, and then we could say it's dependent on another task or it does something, and then we can just write some nice C# code there instead of Bash or PowerShell scripts. And then this is all easily invoked from a root PowerShell script that's provided to us by Cake. The way VSTS handles it is we call the PowerShell script, and then it calls downloads any necessary Cake scripts, and then it calls this. And the nice thing about this, and the reason why we went down this direction, is we want people to be able to create your installers, your upgrades, your source, any of the package files. We want to do the exact same thing on the build server as you can on the local machine. We can obviously start creating all sorts of VSTS build tasks and what have you, but that's not as easy to replicate on a local machine. So Cake allows us to be able to run the exact same package on both environments. So that's pretty much the reason why we went down Cake for that. And then the other thing I want to mention is this is just focused really on creating those package installers. One of the other things that we want to do is we want to create a simple build and unit test that's going to run before this as part of that pull request workflow, which we haven't done yet because we want to get this working so we can use it for the 921 release and create that installer.
Yep, it's kind of the first step here in a iterative process. We have to get that 921 build out. It's something we don't want to do manually. It's something that I'm sure BSW could run on their internal build server, but all the scripts are there. It's just a matter of tying it together to generate that final install zip. And I'm surprised it worked like the first try. So I was pretty excited, and that's kind of what drove me going a lot further on it yesterday than I expected to. All the build results are public. So here's our .NET Foundation account that is running the latest build. Unfortunately, this build, I realized, Andrew, after we got off our call before this meeting, isn't capturing any artifacts. So that's something that we need to modify. This window is my own personal VSTS account, which I just set up. I don't quite have access yet to the .NET Foundation account. So in here, I was just making sure all the tasks were running good last night. If we go into the successful build, there's a artifacts tab, and in there we've got the install and upgrade zips, which are almost identical to the 920 builds. I've got one issue left, which is the CK editor install file configure folder instead of the module folder. And after that's fixed, then the install and the upgrades should be identical. But on every build, you can publish to a file path. This is publishing to the PSTS internal file system. And in here, we've got basically a quote unquote nightly build for my local branch as of 17 hours ago. And right now, what we're in the process of doing is migrating all this config over to the .NET Foundation config. So it's all public. Everyone can see it. Everyone can download it. And both me and Andrew and anyone else that wants to participate will be able to work on the same system and get things going.
And Oliver, I've got a question. You know, sometimes people ask, like, why can't I get the latest build on the website or on GitHub or on the web app gallery? You can publish to multiple locations from here, I guess, right?
Yeah. So.
Yeah.
Sorry, so one of the things. So this is
go ahead, Andrew.
We're going with the the simple stuff first. Right now, the simple stuff is create packages and create stuff. Link it up to the pull request. The next step is going to be, where are we going to deliver this to? Do we want to deliver it to GitHub? Do we want to deliver it to the DNN software website? Do we want to deliver it to some other repository somewhere else? So this build is just going to be creating that packages. The delivery side of the process, which is going to happen after we get a little bit further along, is going to take those build artifacts and deliver it to wherever we want it to be delivered to.
So we can post to the NuGet, we can post some to the DNN website, we can probably do an automatic tweet that says, hey, there's a new build. I mean, the options are endless with how we can automate the system.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering, that we could push to different locations. So that's awesome.
And then I guess the last thing here is I also created a DevOps label under our issue tracker. So these are all the open issues that we currently have reported that are related to how we're packaging and deploying the platform. The one issue that's been reported a couple times now is, one of the normal assemblies that gets published to NuGet slipped through the cracks in the last release. So that's something we're going to work on, getting the NuGet pipeline to publish when we deem a build is in the release state, ready to be published. So if there's any other packaging issues or anything like that that you guys have noticed, this is where you want to go look to see if they've been logged yet. So we can get them resolved. And I think that's all I have so far on this. If there's questions or comments.
So if I may, I have one comment. So that's on what we discussed earlier on Slack. I mean, me and Oliver. So the problem I see with what we have at the moment is that, like you showed, you download the latest development of whatever sticky editor and persona bar and the other things. That's not something that will produce unstable builds, in a sense that now first you go with 9.2.1 and then when you go to 9.2.2 it would keep downloading the latest development for the past build. So if you check out any past commit, you don't download the same version of your dependencies, right? So this is where I keep coming back to a dependency management system. We have NuGet as the only way that we have out of the box that can manage that for us. Otherwise you could end up with same version or same code for platform using different version, different code for the dependencies, which is not desirable. And in general, just quickly on if we can get RC build of platform for 9.2.1. I'd rather we didn't. I mean, this is great progress. Let's work on that. let's get it working if we can. But for Evoke, this would be trouble because we have our own pipeline still, right? That also drives the CI for Evoke. And so now if we keep that, if we have separate build for platform that we use for Evoke, and then we have separate build and you publish this as 921, those may not be exactly the same, which can also be weird for the users. So, and I don't think we can, in the next 2 odd weeks, we can use those builds to also package Evoke. I think, from my perspective, that's a blocker for the community builds to use the new pipeline already.
I guess my question to that would be, why are we blocked as a community from packaging in our manner when the goal being that ESW for Evoke consumes our delivered packages? As long as we deliver the package in the same manner, is that a concern, or is it because of the fact that your current scripts are basically doing a repackage of platform rather than consuming the publicly released packages?
Yeah, well, the changes may not be that much. I mean, well, the scripts are, the whole process is a bit on a complicated side, if not complex. But it just may be that we may not be able on the ESW side to consume the community build packages before, by the time we want to actually perform the release. I mean, yeah.
Okay.
Well, would that,
further down the road, of course, we all we want to do is consume community build packages. I'm just saying that we may not have enough time to set our CI to use that.
I mean, I guess the optimal way to handle the Evoke builds would be the Evoke CI would download the 921 release candidate zip file, and from there it would extract it. If you're replacing and removing modules, you would just delete the zips from the install folder and add your new zips into the install folder and repackage it and label it as Evoke. I mean, the zip that this script outputs is, besides the issue that I mentioned with the CK editor provider being in the wrong folder, it is identical to the 920 build. We're not changing the file structure. We're not adding anything new into it. We're not removing anything that was in there previously. Even the source zip, that's what I'm working on right now, is trying to get the source zip to fix one of the larger issues, which is you download the source zip and you're missing the persona bar because it's in another repository. So that the new source zip would include, whatever the branch was at the time of the persona bar in the source zip for 921. I totally agree. I totally agree that going out and fetching the latest from a development branch isn't the best way to solve it. But right now, none of these projects have a release on GitHub that we can consume. And as soon as we get to the point where the persona bar has a release, and that release contains a .NET Nuke installable install zip, a source zip, and a symbol zip, when that stuff happens for all of our sub projects, we can then switch things around to consume the pre-built assemblies for a specific tag version. And whether we do that with a direct HTTP call or whether we use NuGet to manage that dependency, I think that's still an item that's up for debate. But right now we don't have that, and we have a release that needs to get packaged, and we've got really no way to package it.
Okay.
I mean, sorry if that didn't make sense or. same thing. I make sense to me.
It does make all the sense, and it's great that you're working on fixing the issues that we have. It's just my only concern is that if this is not ready for the release, and Evoke cannot, or if there are any issues and Evoke cannot use it, and we would be forced to use the current thing. And then if we deploy Evoke using a different packaging of DNN, it may cause unexpected issues.
I mean, is it too much to get done to just, I mean, I don't know what the Evoke build task is like, but my guess is it's downloading doing a git clone and compiling it for Evoke and running through everything, just a few extra packages. It shouldn't be that difficult.
Yeah, well, it should be
those steps.
Yeah, Evoke does not. Evoke does not compile a platform. It takes the package that is done by the platform and consumes that and adds stuff on top of that. That's the whole idea, that we don't want to compile.
And so if we give you a path to VSTS to a file share that says, here's the release candidate 921 build, nothing should change in the Evoke pipeline except for the location you're downloading the.
Yeah, I think the dependencies, yes, I think, Thomas, you're going to have to work with the CI/CD who is looking into that, because the dependencies have to change, or somehow the trigger has to change, because now if the platform build is being built somewhere else, and then ideally you should generate an Evoke package as well as soon as a platform build is done, because that's how it is done today. The thing at the very bottom that gets built, it triggers builds for everything upwards, including Evoke Engage. So you have to figure out a way to get triggered as soon as a new VSTS build is generated. You're going to have to fire up your pipeline.
Well, there's a webhook, we can just call that. I mean, simple as that. Or you guys can, from on the Evoke side of stuff, can long pull the endpoint. But it'd probably be easiest if there was a webhook. We could just send a simple web request saying, "There's a new build ready. Go."
Yeah, how would another vendor do it if they were making a distribution based off of DNN?
I mean, right now I think it would be the same thing. It would be, you would download the zip. You would either have a build task that's running, that's automating, the zips you're removing and the zips that you're adding into the install folder, and pressing it again. I will say, maybe I shouldn't say it from the outcome of the last meeting, but my final goal here is I would like to have an XML file with a definition. So all this stuff isn't hard-coded, that we have a line that's, CK editor, here's its name on GitHub, here's its, latest release that we want. And from those three variables, we go out and get that latest release. The problem, I actually wrote that XML file first, because I said, okay, I'm going to go down that path and just read this XML file and go through a loop and get everything. But the problem we have right now is these 5 projects are totally different. CK editor drops stuff into the bin folder. It doesn't have an install. CK editor creates an install that needs to be copied out. But the current build task also takes the provider assembly file from that install file and copies it into the bin as well. Admin experience has a crazy file structure. It's using Java and YUI. Its packages are kind of labeled slightly differently. So kind of what I want to do after this as the next iteration is to kind of go through and clean up all of our external projects that we're consuming and come up with a set of standards that say, if you're going to be in the platform, your install zip needs to be labeled in the syntax. It needs to go into this subfolder in your project. So that way, we're not hard coding all these steps. We have a guide that says if you want a extension in the platform, these are the checkboxes that need to be checked, and then we can review it for being a default module or being part of distribution later on down the line. I know we're quite a ways off from that distribution, but it's something that I still want to get towards in our CI packaging system.
I think that's exactly the right approach. I mean, in the end, it's like a cascade or like a river. We're going downstream, and we've decided at a very abstract and high level that DNN platform is going to be leading, meaning that anything else that wants to join that river at some point will need to adapt to make sure it can consume it.
Yep. And like, I know some of the items that you want to see happen is like being able to just give a URL to the installer and have it download it.
Right.
So, you know, we would have an option for, I think at that point, the online installer and an offline installer where the build script is going through and it's still downloading all those, because there's still a lot of environments that are behind firewalls. They don't have direct internet access.
Yeah.
So we kind of have to make sure that we are supporting both sets of users still.
Yeah. Yes. It's clear. Cool.
And I guess Tomas, for the NuGet packaging decision, I don't know if, I mean, we've got, what, 15 minutes left on this call. I don't know what else we have on the agenda we need to discuss. I'm happy to meet with you anytime. Maybe see if we can get Andrew and Mitch involved as well and try to figure out how we want to handle the NuGet dependencies, how we want to final, you know, what goal we want to get to final package all of our assemblies and distribute them at development time for the local developer, at CI time for like the nightly build server, for pull requests that are checked in, and for people who need to go out and download the source code, you know, 2 years later for an old build and fix a critical bug on their system without being forced to upgrade to version 10 or version 11.
All right, so the only other big thing that I wanted to try to briefly talk about is to continue the conversation that we had last week regarding the minimums and architecture for liquid content. I guess, Ash, has there been any changes or further thoughts in that regard from last week's conversation?
No, there has not been any update. The only thing that Thomas and I were seeing, and I don't know how much time we have, was that we're going to do a demo of the liquid content. So we've got 12 minutes. If you want to do it now, we could do it now. Thomas was going to do it, or we could do it as a first thing next time around. So we want to give you first a demo, and then we want to, in the next call, we're going to look into the internals.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been a number of conversations that have been had, you know, offline since last week's meeting. And I think there's still a growing number of concerns with system limitations, deployment risk, and things like that with the current proposed architecture. So I think getting the demo, getting a look underneath the hood of what's there is probably going to be good. I'm assuming that 12 minutes is not enough time to even do a demo justice at this point.
No, I don't think so. Yeah, because yeah, right, Thomas? Yeah, I don't think so. Probably
will be very, very rushed. Yeah.
Okay, so I think what we want to do is let's set that as the agenda item for next week. I may not be able to make next week's meeting, but I will be able to review the video. But I think if we could go next week and do a demo of it, and then maybe spend the second half of the meeting going over some of the architecture or dealing with anything with the 9.2.1 release that we need to. I think that would be good. The biggest concern that I'm still hearing and that worries me with regards to liquid content is bumping the requirements to SQL Server 2016 or adding a virtual directory dependency. and checking with some of the hosting companies that are out there, checking with, existing customers, that infrastructure ask has a pretty high cost associated with it without a lot of notice. So there's still a lot of concern there. And I think there's also echoes of concern, on that architecture side, making sure that we'll be able to support it. So I think it's important for us to review all of that. The one resounding thing that I heard after the meeting was, I was asked a simple question: would we reject a pull request that was implemented with that infrastructure if it wasn't from ESW? And the answer to that was that we would most likely reject it. So there's a bit of a concern, I think, in the community around how we can lower that threshold of environment dependencies as low as possible, with still retaining the most flexibility. So I think as we're looking at the architecture and under the covers, we want to take that into consideration. At least that's what I've heard from the group between last week and now. Any thoughts from anyone else?
No, I think I think you're quite right, and it's a cost benefit analysis that we have to go through. Is all this worth what you get back, and can you because we have to make the case to the community, and when we move those dependencies. So
yeah. And I think the one piece that came with that, and Will mentioned in comments, right? Not all costs are monetary. And I think the thing that got me was a conversation I had with JR about this probably 20 minutes before we started this meeting today. And that is that the concern being a release, we're in June. Let's just say that we get this done at the end of Q3 or early Q4. A release with a couple of months notice. Let's just assume that we make an email blast today that says you need SQL Server 2016. We're setting ourselves up by bouncing that requirement so far ahead that 10x will be created or perceived as I don't need to go there release, which is the same thing that we had happen with 8, which is the same thing that we had happen with 9. As the people try to stay away from the persona bar, or they try to stay away from other features, which may introduce to the community a need for us to try to better support from a security perspective, additional long-term support style enhancements on the 9x platform. And maybe that's something that we decide for the future that we want to do. But I think that that's the thing that this group really needs to take a look at, is as we're managing the direction, as we're managing the way that we can get people to move forward, as much as we want liquid content and we want it to be an integral part, what are the ramifications to the community in the long term with regards to moving forward? Because what we've done with 9.2 is we've forced people's hands into upgrading. We've forced people into taking a huge breaking change. At least with a huge breaking change, they can uninstall modules, they can update to new versions of modules, those kinds of things. By enforcing users to SQL Server 2016, there's licensing costs, server configuration costs, migration costs, whatever the case may be, depending on the environment that they're in, that is going to cost those people more. And I'm almost of the point that if we do agree that it's acceptable that we have a lot of new dependencies that we're not giving people much notice on, that we almost have to support in one form or another an enhanced support, long-term support, whatever we want to call it, chain of releases on 9x. And I guess what I want to do is leave that as a thought for this group, because I've heard it from half the people on this call that it's a concern. And Ash, I guess the point to you and to Thomas are, we want to get there. We want to be able to do all of this stuff. But I think at the same time, the responsibility for us and the stewardship of the open source platform is to take the concerns of the open source users as number one priority moving forward. So we're not trying to be difficult here, but every person that I've talked to has raised major concerns about going to SQL Server 2016. And then there's some secondary concerns about the cost for additional virtual directories. And I don't know exactly what that means infrastructure-wise. The conversation, right, of making it an optional module and then maybe rolling it in later as a more complete component, all of those things, I just think it's things we need to consider.
So, from our perspective also, there's a lot of cost involved, right? So in moving it to the platform and things like that. So, I mean, I think we're going to have to think from an ESW perspective, worthwhile to even pursue it if there is so much of resistance in kind of embracing it, right? Because it's not a trivial effort on our end as well. So I think it's good that we're talking. I think let's continue our conversation to see if, we have to make decisions, right? We can't remain in limbo. We have to decide whether it's okay or not okay, right? But if 2016 is not okay, what are the alternatives? If virtual directory is not okay, what are the alternatives? Could a solution be built? If the solution is built, will that be good enough? So I think then we would have to unfortunately get back to the drawing board to see kind of is this project even worthwhile pursuing it? Right?
Yeah, well, let's discuss that after the demo as well, and the more technical, in-depth discussion of
right, because the driving force for that moving liquid content into the platform is nothing like a business reason per se. From Andrew's perspective, he feels that a CMS must have sound content architecture.
Yeah.
And DNN did not have content architecture like any other CMSs. We've tried that in 8.0, and there is a content item system, and that's all incomplete, and it's not full solution. Now, this is a full solution that allows you to, from the database up until the UI, lots of possibilities. So that's the motivation. Now, if the messaging is that it's not important, then I think he has to know, right?
Yeah. All right.
I think we should listen to the demo and discuss that afterwards.
Yeah. And I just want to reiterate, Ash, the number one thing, everyone is in complete agreement that the functionality is important, that the features are important. The concern is in the financial cost, the additional development cost that may fall on the community, and the deployment and support costs for organizations. It's not at all about the features or functionality. It is much more about what the ramifications are of requiring, essentially an 8-year technology jump over what we require today, with limited notice and limited runtime. My guess is that the right solution is going to be that the community takes on even more work in that we have to maintain 2 parallel streams for a period of time. But that's the conversation. I guess I wanted to make sure to express that that's what I'm hearing from this larger group. And that's the scenario that we're trying to validate against, is how do we manage that expectation and not lose the people that we already have, that we've already been running a risk of losing thus far.
And I think we have to look at all the different use cases for DNN, where DNN is used currently, whether it makes sense for 90% of them, because otherwise we should try to put it in. If it's just an average case, and then we might call it an extension instead of making it part of button of the default, or making it a quiet part at least.
All right. Anything else that we need to?
Mitchell, you had on the schedule discussing like meeting frequency.
Yeah, my original hope was to try to get it to where we didn't need to meet quite as often, but at least I think we still need the weekly meetings because we have a lot of things that still need to be done. Does anybody have a strong feeling that we need to change this meeting frequency from weekly?
At the moment, not, in my opinion. I think it's necessary.
There's also a second argument, which is in the run-up to releases, I think it would be silly to not meet weekly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I was going to say the same thing as well.
Yeah.
Maybe between 9.2.1 and 9.3, bump down to like every other week, but
Right.
a couple weeks before a release, I think meeting weekly will be very important.
Yeah.
Especially during the RC phase.
Yeah, exactly.
All righty. Sounds good. Well, we will. So next week, Ash and Thomas will basically give the meeting to you two to run things through for us with liquid content, and we'll go from there.
Sounds good.
All righty. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.